Greetings, it is I, Tantus Narban Dracovin, Lord and Emperor of the Dracovin Empire, and welcome. It's time to continue our discussion on the history of Magic the Gathering. Today I'm going to talk about Chronicles. Chronicles was the first compilation set. So let's get into talking about what it means to be a compilation set. It's really one of the few released in a kind of mainstream way. So let's just talk about it. It was released in July of 1995 and it had 116 cards. This was the 12th set that was printed. As I said, this was the first compilation set that was released. It was not really an official expansion, it was really an extension of 4th edition. So it was really meant to add more cards into 4th edition, while sort of being on its own thing. It was really because of this demand for some of the earlier sets, for Arabian Nights, Antiquities, Legends, and Dark, which by now were out of print. That the new players, because there was these surge of players coming in, were interested in it. So this was sort of a response to that, of putting together this compilation of cards from those sets and putting them out there. So the cards were white bordered, similar to that in any of the normal base sets. But it also then showed the expansion symbols on every card. So it was a white bordered card with the expansion symbol. So it itself sort of didn't have an expansion symbol, but all the cards themselves had this symbol on them. Now this was only one of 2 sets which were released with booster packs that had 12 cards in them. The others alliances, which I'm going to mention in a few weeks, but they were the only 2 sets that had 12 cards to a booster pack. Now of course the text on the cards were actually updated. They were to reflect the new sort of rules that had come out, so a lot of these cards had updated text that showed the changes in the rules that had occurred since they originally were printed. A lot of the cards in this set were reprinted, as I said, because of this demand for the earlier cards. And these, rather than being very powerful cards or being very rare cards, they were ones that had this sort of coolness factor to them, that people thought were really cool. That they were popular less because of their, incredible power or incredible, expensiveness, and more for they had this interest in them because they were neat, or they had effects that were, useful, that they still had this popularity to them. The next core set that came out, 5th edition, actually went away from this model right away. Since this was sort of an expansion on 4th edition, when it came to 5th edition, they just incorporated a lot of these more cards back into the set. So the set just got larger instead, rather than sort of having an extra expansion or an extra extension onto the end of it that was a separate set. Now this set went out of print in 1996. They printed about 180 million cards in this expansion, or extension I should really say. Now this set was only printed in English and Japanese, and the Japanese versions of them actually have black borders. For the European nations, for those for foreign languages, for French, German, and Italian, they didn't do this set. They made their own sort of set, which I'm actually going to talk about next week. It's going to be one of the few non-English language sets that I'm going to talk about, that specifically was never printed in English. And it effectively is very similar to Chronicles, and we'll talk about it then, that it's similar to Chronicles, got some similarities in the cards, but it's its own thing. And again, it was only printed in foreign languages. So let's talk about some of the cards that were in this set. So all these cards are of course reprints, but these are the ones that really had an importance to them. Of course they had the 5 Elder Dragons, which I mentioned when I talked about Legends, but since they had this sort of coolness factor to them, which all the cards in this did, they were reprinted here. Of course there's the Urza's Lands. Again, it's something that had this coolness factor to them, and so when this set was reprinted, when this set was printed with all the reprints in it, it was another one that was very popular. So again, it had, these are actually still good and have some price to them in comparison to Elder Dragons, but because it also did have this great coolness factor to them, it was printed too. So the Elder Dragons were from Legends, Urza's Lands were of course from Antiquities. Next up is Wretched, which was from the Dark. Now the Wretched said, at the end of combat, gain control of all creatures blocking the Wretched as long as you control the Wretched. So it was a kind of interesting card that you could put something like a regeneration on, so that you could keep attacking with it. It was a 2/5, and if someone chose to block with it, if it didn't kill whatever you were blocking, you could then sort of steal it away. So it was interesting, and you could combine it in a green-black deck. I did like, regeneration, lore on it, stole everybody's creatures. It was some of those older kind of combos that you could have at the time. Next up was Solkanar the Swamp King. He was a 5/5 legend from, of course, Legends, and he had Swamp Walk, and whenever a player played a black spell, you gained 1 life. After that, we have, again, another one from Legends, Dracovin Blackblade. It's another legend. Its power and toughness is star. Its power and toughness are both, the star in them is equal to the number of lands you control. So that was its entire thing. Its power and toughness was equal to the number of lands you control. Now the last one I want to talk about is Hell's Caretaker. Hell's Caretaker is a 1/1. Its special ability allowed you to tap it, sacrifice a creature you control, and then return a creature from your graveyard to play. So basically it's like I get rid of a creature I have in play and get back a creature from my graveyard to play. Now this was only allowed to be done during your upkeep, which was the sort of restriction on it. But it was actually pretty good because you could I actually still do use it. When I have a deck that has token generation, I can sacrifice a token to get back a normal creature from my graveyard. So, I mean, that's a really great combo with it. So some of these cards actually still do have use even now. I mean, granted, a lot of them have lost a lot of their power. Granted, a lot of them, they still do have this sort of coolness factor to them. They aren't maybe the most expensive. Some of them do have a little price to them still, like the Urza's Land. Hell's Caretaker is worth a couple of dollars sort of thing. But they all had this sort of again, that coolness that they're talking about that made them interesting cards to put together into a compilation set for people to want to purchase. And it did have popularity. I bought a bunch of Chronicles myself. It is one of the 2 sets that I have completed from the old cards. Since I started collecting cards again, I have completed more sets. But from the older cards, back in the day when I first started collecting, it's one of the 2 that I have complete. So anyway, that's all of it for today. I just wanted to talk about Chronicles, went over the history a bit, talked about a few of the cards from it, talked about why it was made, and why not a lot of more compilations similar to it exist anymore. Sort of an idea that they have existed in the past, and they don't really exist as much anymore, the same kind of set that this was. It was an experiment that came and went. Anyway, so if you have any questions, comments, anything you want to say, anything you think I missed, just leave in the comments below. Please like this video if you enjoyed it. It shows your support for the channel and the Empire. Please subscribe if you haven't. We're always looking for more members, more citizens of the Empire. And please share this video. If you know anyone that would learn from it or would just enjoy watching it, please share it with them. And until the next time, I bid you farewell.